Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today on the You're Not Alone podcast. I am so excited to have you on. I want to take a quick second and just allow you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. It's wonderful to be with you today. Great to have such history with you, and enjoyed featuring you as well in One Mind media that we do together. And so I'm Brandon Staglin. I'm president of an organization called One Mind. We are an organization that accelerates collaborative research and advocacy to enable all individuals facing brain health challenges to build healthy and productive lives. And I feel grateful to be in this position. I am an individual with lived experience with schizophrenia myself. I was diagnosed when I was 18. So for my case, many years ago, 1990, and feel grateful to have been able to live well today, thanks to a variety of things which we can talk about, Zach, which we have before, but happy to go over it again with you, and love this chance to talk with you today.
Yeah, and I'm such a huge fan of One Mind and just the Staglin family and you and everything that you've done with your life. So it just felt like, as I was putting together that short list of people that I wanted to interview for the podcast, it was no question at all that you were at the very top of that list. You are a genuine heart in this mental health space, brain health space, as One Mind likes to put it, and a term that I use now because of you all. And so I wanted to start out by reading a little excerpt from one of the papers, one of the blogs that you sent me recently. And it felt like I felt so in that moment with you. And I really want to go back to that place in time, because I think for my listeners, they're at the start of their mental health journeys as well. And this can be really, I think, important for them. And so you wrote, "When I was a teen, solitude was my friend. Driven by a love for the cosmos, I'd spend hours climbing the dusty trails of," I'm going to butcher this, Briones Park.
That's it.
Park in Lafayette, and building original model spacecraft from toy construction parts. I loved life sciences too, and volunteered as a chimpanzee researcher at the Oakland Zoo. Then, just as I was stretching intellectually and enjoying gratifying friendships, a psychotic episode scrambled my future. And you go on to talk about that journey, laying in the front lawn on the grass, looking up at the cosmos, and the cosmos looking down upon you in a very different light at that moment. So can you take us back to your first psychotic episode? And as an advocate, I don't know why and I don't want to derail from this, I don't like that word psychotic that much. And I wonder what your perspective is on that. But I want to go back to that time period.
Yeah, thanks. We can unpack a lot of that there. Before I begin, I also want to say thank you for all the kind words that you said about how you see the work One Mind does in my story. And I'm a fan of your story as well. I loved reading your book, You're Not Alone. It inspired me and educated me in many ways. So it's an honor to be here with you as well.
I appreciate that.
To go back to that episode that I had, so I was 18, as I mentioned. It had been a really challenging first year of college for me. I was at Dartmouth in New Hampshire, and I encountered a culture shock when I went there, being from the West Coast and a small town, and now being in this microcosm of all the world coming to Dartmouth. And it was challenging academically, challenging socially, in many ways. And that year I met and got together with my first serious girlfriend. And we actually had a terrible breakup toward the end of the year. And I was reeling from that, as well as from the challenge of finding my first summer employment that summer after freshman year, and thinking to myself, am I really worthy to be an adult or to see myself as an adult? And all of these stressful thoughts were whirling around in my head as I kind of went through those first few weeks of that summer at home, my parents' home in Lafayette. And they had coincidentally gone away on a trip to France because they planned that for many months. I elected to stay back. I was initially going to go with them, but I stayed back because I wanted to find work and prove to myself that I could. And all the stress while they were gone kind of got to me. And I had this psychotic episode while trying to fall asleep one night. I had no one to talk to about it, no one to help me process it. It was terrifying. And I felt like at that moment when the episode happened, like half my mind had disappeared. It was like I couldn't recognize any of the emotions or the affection or the love that I used to feel for my family and friends. And I tried to remember those family and friends in that moment, and I did, but none of the feelings were there.
Mm.
It was just really, really scary. And I had this delusion. Delusions are a common part of what we call psychosis, and we can talk more about stigma around the term later. But I had this delusion that if I let any new experiences come in through the right half, remember I said I lost half of my experience. If I let any new experiences come into the right half of my head, my eye, my ear, that a new personality would inhabit my body, like a new spirit or something would have my body coming to fruition on its own and would take me over, and the rest of me would be lost. And that really scared me, that thought. I was convinced it was a genuine possibility. So I spent the next 3 days trying to find that part of me that I'd lost, wandering around the community, and it was a really terrifying time.
So, and this is so fascinating to me because this is truly the first conversation that I've had, like interview with somebody with schizophrenia. And so I've done my own independent research, but I think having lived experience conversations, as you and I both know, is so important. And so when, I guess, as you were laying there that night, did it kind of just all come in as a wave at once, where it felt like there was this disconnect between the emotions that you once associated with your loved ones? Like, walk me through that, because that's very fascinating to me, and I can only imagine how unsettling and startling that must have been, like, at the start.
Yeah, I'll give you a narrative of how it went for me, and I can recall it clearly even today, 32 years after the fact. So I was lying in bed and trying to fall asleep with all of these stressful thoughts in my head, keeping me awake, kind of racing through my head. And the tension in my face as a result of all those thoughts was kind of getting more and more screwed up, screwed into my face.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking to myself about, like, a thought came into my head about a movie that I had seen many times with my little sister.
Yeah.
Shannon is her name. Alice in Wonderland, by the Disney 1960s version, animated. And there's a scene where she is in this eerie forest at night called Tulgey Wood. And there's a sign that says that there. And she's sitting on a rock, crying to herself and singing a song. And the song is, I give myself very good advice, but I very seldom follow it. That explains the trouble that I'm always in. And she was so alone there and so sad. As all these little creatures kind of closed in around her to listen, I heard a voice in my head say, my heart goes out to her. And then this other dimension came in and, like, kind of, like you use your word, swooped in, where it was like, no, that's crazy. Don't let your heart go out to a fictional character. And this, like, negation wall, to put it one way, slammed down in my head and walled off that half of me that had that compassion, that had that love.
Right.
And I couldn't access that anymore. And it was like this whirling void was left in the right half of my head. That's how it felt, right? This sounds bizarre. And I thought, this can't be happening. What am I going to do? I gotta feel who myself again. Like, who am I now? So I try to get that self back.
Yeah. And I would say it doesn't, to somebody who lives with a brain disorder as well, it doesn't sound bizarre to me. It like, at the onset of OCD for me, I was flooded with what they call intrusive thoughts. So thoughts that didn't feel in alignment with who I was as a person, but the harder that I tried to stop them, the louder that they got in my head. And if there's one thing that I've learned about the brain, there is an infinite amount of possibilities, right? In ways that our brain can unfold and think and create experiences that, okay, maybe to somebody who doesn't have OCD or doesn't have schizophrenia, might be difficult to understand at first, but it's just a part of the infinite human possibility and what our brains can do and are capable of doing.
Thank you for putting it in perspective. It helps for people to be able to understand what could be happening in the brain when someone has a psychotic episode and have a sense of that it's it is brain based. That your brain is doing something that is different from typical, and as a result, there are ways to address that through scientifically developed treatments as well as lifestyle changes, and we can talk more about how I handle it if you like over time. But I just want to say next that I had none of that knowledge at the time, and so right. And
Yes.
so in fact, I was scared. I'd been scared for many years of going crazy after having kind of a mini psychotic episode some years before, uh, which went away and never recurred until then. And I felt a lot of stigma about this, what I was experiencing. I didn't want to see myself as crazy. I wanted to be what I perceived as a whole person. And so when a friend helped me get to a local psychiatric hospital within a few days of that happening, I was sleep deprived. I just had been wandering around the community all day and driving around at night. Um, I didn't want to go into the hospital. I didn't want to admit that I couldn't handle this on my own. I thought I got to pull myself out of this by my bootstraps. And I think that's a sentiment that many people might have about mental health challenges. But I think it's important to know that you are not alone. As you
Yes.
say, there is support, and it's okay to rely on that support. So my parents did come back as soon as they found out what had happened to me. They came back from France, and I was in the psychiatric hospital at that time, and they took me home and helped me find a psychiatrist that I could trust. And it was a hard slog, um, getting through those first 6 months of trying different medications, trying different things, and happy to talk more about that. But I was ultimately able to go back to school, and my life went on from there.
So there's a couple trains of thought, and you're sparking all sorts of questions that I have. And I told you in advance that this is conversational. I've got a whole list of questions, and we'll see how many we get to. The first thing that I'm curious about is like, okay, so you had your first episode and you were wandering around town, and you said that you were trying to find that part of yourself that you felt you had lost. And I read this in a blog. It was a woman who, she had schizophrenia as well. And I remember I read this blog about a year ago, and she was talking about how she had a stint, 2 or 3 separate stints of homelessness,
Mm.
largely because she had, I want to say, I don't know if the word she used was disillusions, but there were this whole separate world that she had created, that she was allowed to live in when she was homeless, where she was somewhat of a prophet. Like she was helping the world. She had a message, and actually going to seek help to treat schizophrenia was something that she didn't want to do, because it almost brought her back to reality and the situation that she found herself in. So I'm curious, in your work and as somebody with lived experience, have you experienced that side of schizophrenia as well? If so, what is that like? And then,
Hmm.
what have you seen and heard from other people that obviously, I'm sure your story has inspired thousands of people with schizophrenia to, like in OCD, I have people reach out to me. So I'm sure it's been the same with you.
Yeah, and I love the chance to talk with people with similar experiences. And I have several friends also who live with schizophrenia, and had others who are no longer around, um, sadly. But I'm inspired by them as well. One friend said to me, "Psycho the worst thing about psychosis is that you can't share it with anyone."
Mm,
or at least not with people in the mainstream quote unquote world. Uh, and so it is refreshing for me to meet others who have had similar experiences and be able to kind of have that common ground of understanding.
Yeah.
Um, but so yes, I have had an experience like I is the person whose blog you read, does that happen to be, is Bethany Iser by any chance?
It might be. She would.
Yeah.
It might be. Yeah.
Yeah. I
It's
know
been a
her as
year,
well.
but yeah.
Yeah. I was just talking with her last week.
Okay. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. She's amazing. She has her own foundation called Cure SZ, Cure Schizophrenia. So she might be
I
another subject for you to interview.
I'm gonna write her name down. You
Okay.
said it's Bethany, right?
Yeah. Bethany Iser.
Okay.
Anyway, but yeah, that does resonate with me. That experience of like being kind of caught up in the psychosis and kind of liking it to a degree.
Yeah.
Um, so that summer after that psychotic episode, I experienced weird sounding sensations. And to me, they seemed weird at the time, but they seemed real.
Mm,
So, for example, I remember being at home and feeling like there were spirits kind of like entering my body through my feet
mm,
and inhabiting parts of me, and like I could feel them within me and kind of feel their personality within me and kind of think, well, maybe
yep.
they're going to try and take me over, so I would like will them to push out of me.
Yep.
And I was thinking to myself, this is really weird, but if this is real, this gives me access to a world that most people don't have access to,
Mm,
and experiences that most people don't get to have.
right.
So I thought about for a little while, what if I just let myself be like this, quote unquote, crazy?
Yeah.
What if I accepted this as something that I would be for an indefinite period of time? Would I like that later? How would that affect my life? And, but I was thinking about that. Then I remembered all the dreams and plans I had for my life. Like I wanted to be an astronautical engineer. I wanted to build the world's first spaceship, starship, ability to reach another star. That was my dream as a kid. And I thought if I kind of give in to this psychosis, then I will not get to that dream. And I will be probably separate from most of society and the community for the rest of my life. And I thought, well, I
Mm,
want to hold on to rationality. I want to be at one with my family, with my friends, with the plans I have for my life. And so I committed in that moment, I'm going to hold on to that kind of ability to be in reality and hold on to reality, put it that way. And uh, that helped me, that commitment to continue fighting to recover.
That's so inspiring. And you'll see I've got a note card here. I have one on every episode because thoughts come to mind. And what comes to mind there is value-based living. That in that moment, you grounded yourself in something that meant something to you. That despite whatever situation you were going through in that moment, and I speak from experience as well, that there is something bigger that's calling to you, something that you're grounded in, that wants that you want that more than to, in your case, kind of give into the psychosis. In my case, be trapped and crippled by the anxiety and the depression that comes with OCD. Um, and and that's something that I want to unpack with you in terms of that value-based living, because I think in the work that you've done and everything that you do, I see that as so important. And so the question that I have for you, because I know we talked about science-based medical care, you kind of touched on that. What is, as someone who lives with a chronic brain disorder like myself, what is your definition of recovery? Like, what does that mean to you? What does it look like? What did it look like at the start of your journey? How can somebody pull inspiration and almost like a blueprint right now,
Mm-hmm.
who maybe is starting to connect the dots on their end, to get started on that journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was first ill, my goal was to go back to college, resume life with friends there, be with them again, and continue to learn and be able to pursue that career that I dreamed about. So recovery was something that I learned then is being able to do what you care about. And there was still a part of me that wanted to be free of the symptoms and put all of that experience behind me. But over time, I gradually learned to accept that this condition is part of my life and will likely be that way for the rest of my life. So when I was able to accept that, it helped me to move on
Mm.
and do the things that I care about instead of fighting in my brain that I've got this condition and wasting energy on that. I learned to make that leap to acceptance when I read Ellen Saks's book, The Center Cannot Hold My Journey Through Madness.
Mm.
She really inspires me. She's an amazing advocate. She's a law professor at USC who lives with schizophrenia. And
Does she have a TED Talk by chance?
yes, she
I've
does.
watched her TED Talk.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yep.
So having come to that acceptance, I realized that it's okay not to be 100% free of symptoms. And occasionally I do feel a lot of anxiety. Occasionally I do have traces of paranoia. And I just manage those symptoms. And to manage the symptoms, I need to do things to take care of my health, my mental health. And I've learned from you in reading your book about how to practice those things, because it really resonated with me, what you said in your book about like getting enough sleep, exercising, meditating. I do all these things. I also pursue hobbies like playing guitar, which gives me a lot of joy. And above all, spending quality time with my family and my friends and enjoying those experiences keep me grounded. And there was an experience I had that led me to understand the value of being with people, which is something I didn't really get when I was younger. I mean, I liked being with friends, but I didn't really get why that is important. So the experience stems from the depression that I felt when I was coming out of my first episode when I was 18. And I was just so down, waiting for these medications to take effect and dealing with the side effects like thunder and lightning in my head. That's how it felt. And not being able to wake up in the mornings, a lot of sluggishness and weight gain for the medication. So
Yeah.
the uncertainty, would I ever have a life again? So my dad noticed one morning how I was feeling so down. And he said to me, "There's a lot of love coming from here, Brandon." And I met his gaze, and I knew in that moment that he meant it. And I felt simultaneously embarrassed that my illness had caused him pain, but also relieved that he loved me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was a deep connection point for us. And I couldn't feel that love at that moment because I was so wrapped up in my illness. But I wanted to feel that love again
Mm.
for my family, for people in general. And so that, speaking of values-based living, that defined for me the value of love as a primary source of meaning in life. And I've built on that over the years, and I still live by that today.
Man, that is it makes you feel warm on the inside when you hear that. Love is, I mean, and I remember too, at the onset of my symptoms, I was calling my mom, kind of reeling, panicking, confiding in her, not telling my dad because I was scared of what he would think of me. And I still distinctly remember the very first time that he called me and said, "Son, like, your mother tells me you've been dealing with these symptoms. I don't care what you're going through. I love you. You're my son, and I'm here to support you through all of it." And I think, and that's why I created this podcast too, Brandon, because not everybody gets that level of love.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that your voice can be a source of love and comfort, that hopefully mine as well can be a source of love and comfort for those who are going through whatever it is that they're struggling with right now, because it is a key ingredient to recovery.
Absolutely. Love is essential for like for relationships to be strong and deep and source of strength. Um, I want to quote a couple of great sayings that I've heard. One is by Ellen Sachs, who I mentioned a moment ago. And when I was talking with her one day, she said, as I was coming out of my schizophrenia, I want to develop more friendships. And this resonated with me deeply because I felt very socially inept when I was coming out of schizophrenia and the symptoms. She said, the best way to have friends, to make friends, is to be a good friend.
Mm,
And another quote, similarly by the singer-songwriter Jewel, it's in a song of hers called What You Are, which came out in 2010. It says, if you want love, it's not that tough. Start by giving it first.
mm,
And
mm.
there's danger in that because it makes you vulnerable. But you may find that if you try that, that people will respond well and will feel that love as well. And whether or not they feel the same level of love for you, you will have made them stronger, which is a wonderful thing in and of itself.
Yeah, I agree. Were you, I know that you said at the start, was it hard for you to tap into that emotion at this, like at the start when you were right at the start of your recovery?
Yes, it was. As I said, I was very socially inept. Part of schizophrenia is what we call quote unquote negative symptoms, which
Okay.
simply means things that are taken away from you, like capacities that are taken away from you or
Mm,
reduced. That's why it's called negative, the reduction in your ability. And these are things like reduction in emotional range, reduction in motivation, energy, reduction in ability to think clearly and be understood clearly when you speak.
yeah.
And as you may imagine, all these things really are an obstacle for healthy social relationships. So it wasn't in, so I did have a second episode in when I was about 25. And after that second episode, that was a much more devastating time than the first episode because I thought, my gosh, I thought I was past all this. I thought I don't have to deal with this anymore. And all of a sudden, I have to resign from my job. I can't go to graduate school like I had planned. And I might never get out of this time. And so I was down for about 2 years. I had seen a new psychiatrist. I got new medications and they stabilized me, but I wasn't really well at all. And I couldn't interact with people successfully. Living alone, it was very lonely. So what helped me get past that at that time was a science-based intervention, actually. And it wasn't just the science, but what interacting with the intervention that helped. So it's a thing called cognitive training where you do these exercises for your brain, in this case on a laptop computer. And now you can do it on a smartphone and training my brain to pay attention better, to remember things better, to focus better,
Mm,
and to even tell the difference better between what I'm really hearing and what I'm imagining I'm hearing. So kind of be more in touch with reality around me.
mm,
And after doing these exercises on a computer for an hour a day, 5 days a week for 2 months. I had to really commit myself and do it. During all throughout the time and after, especially, I was more fluent socially, and it snowballed. The more time I spent with people, the easier it got. Practice makes perfect, they say. It's like building a muscle. You have to keep working it to keep building it, but you start to use these things in everyday life, and then you're using it all the time, and so it
yeah.
stays strong. And then kind of coming out of that experience, um, I read a book I was being treated at UCSF and I went to the UCSF bookstore and I found a book called A General Theory of Love. And it kind of reiterated what I talked about and reminded me of what I talked about, what I learned from that experience with my dad, that love is essential for healthy relationships and being healthy in life. And coming from that perspective as well, it helped me to re-engage in reaching out to people again.
Yeah.
And so that built my momentum to be with people again.
So something that I'm curious about too, because you said that the second episode was worse than the first. What do you think for listeners? I know that there's going to be people listening who are at the start of their journey. And they're going to they want to know all of the tips, right? They want to know, okay, what are the pitfalls that Brandon went through that he can teach me that I can avoid? What got you to that point where you had the second episode? Like what factors played in that caused the second episode, or kind of the relapse, if you will?
Yeah. Well, I was working at a satellite engineering company in the Silicon Valley. That job was stressful.
Yep.
I had a roommate who I didn't get along with, and the stresses of those things compounded by the fact that I was reducing my medication at the time because I'd gotten into graduate school and I knew that I had to sleep less than 9 hours per night, like the
Mm,
medication as a side effect made me do.
yep.
All these things confluenced, not sure that's the right word, but to launch me into another episode. And it was just awful. I thought that I didn't want to go back into this whole mire again of these symptoms. So I couldn't tell anybody at work what I was going through. Nobody knew that I had this condition. I never told anyone. And that's something we got to work on today in our world is workplace acceptance of people with different conditions, right?
Right.
Do you ever talk about that in your work or work on that?
Yeah. I mean, that's something that and it's funny because having a background in corporate America, I still remember I had two, I'll have two quick stories for you because this is to kind of piggyback off what you were just saying and not feeling comfortable opening up in the workplace. So I started to experience the onset of my brain disorder down in Raleigh, North Carolina in 2016. I then moved out to Southern California with my wife in late 2017, basically 2019, like it was almost the end of the year. And so I was working around a new team. And at this point, I was still in the closet about my brain disorder. But a mentor came into my life and I wanted to help. That was always a thing. And I think that you and that's the commonality that I see in us is just this deep desire to give back and help. And make sure that people know they're not alone, that, you don't have to suffer in silence. That's like half the battle. And so I opened up to a guy at work because I was starting to do the advocacy work in the collegiate space. And I was like, well, this is kind of a part of who I am. Like, I don't want to be able to hide it. And one friend took it really, really well at work. The other one, I remember we were sitting down to lunch and his face just went ghost white. Had no idea how to talk about it. And he clammed up. And thankfully, I was in a place where I was very much so comfortable with the diagnosis. You talk about acceptance as a key to recovery. I agree with you so much on the acceptance. Like, it is such a critical part of the recovery process because in 2016, 2017, there was a part of me that hated me. I just wanted my old brain back. What is this stupid OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder? I don't want this. I didn't choose this. What did I do to deserve this? Those kind of thoughts, right? And just yearning for the old Zach. And there was just a turning point where I was like, the old Zach isn't coming back. That's not happening. So you're either moving forward or you cease to exist. Which option do you want? And I love life. So acceptance, it can be hard at first. But the second one was stigmatizing. And I think that's why I've been working with companies like PepsiCo and really trying to expand my reach on the mental health education and advocacy side, because I opened up to a team of coworkers and there was one guy in the group who very stigmatized approach. He was like, Zach, I want to talk to you after work. Can you give me a call? So I give him a call and he proceeds to tell me that he doesn't believe that OCD or anxiety or depression are real and that they're made up. And I was really polite with him because I understand it. If you don't have the education and you haven't been through the experience, it can be hard to understand. But I had to have a conversation with him, and I think at the end of it, his opinion was changed. He apologized. But to your point, like, you not being able to open up at work is a real challenge, because you talking about the things that got you to that point: stress at the job, stress with your roommate and that relationship. You were reducing your medication at the time, which was then also causing you to sleep less. We're already a sleep deprived nation. People don't get enough sleep in this country. I speak to college students across the country, and when I poll the room and ask who gets 8 or more hours of sleep a night, nobody raises their hand. So what you're talking about is real human situation: stress, medication reduction, and lack of sleep, which led to another episode. But had you been able to talk about it at work and address it properly, this could have been avoided.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So thank you for the work that you do to educate folks. By the way, I thought that was really brave how you talked to your coworker and explained it with so level-headedly, and wonderful that he was able to learn from you. That's inspiring to hear. More of that needs to happen. So, for example, One Mind has a division called One Mind at Work, which is doing amazing outreach and education, providing services to companies around the world. There are currently about 150 organizations that are part of One Mind at Work. And these organizations subsume about 8 million employees put together. So the One Mind at Work services are providing now improved mental health benefits and support for a total of about 26 million people around the world, if you include the families of the employees, because they're part of their life as well.
That is absolutely amazing. I mean, that's where you see significant cultural change right there, is 26 million people, because that information compounds too, right? Because they tell a friend, their perspective shifts, they tell a friend, that friend's perspective shifts, they tell a friend, so on and so forth, which I think is just absolutely amazing. And so that's why I wanted to ask you that question about kind of what got you to that point, because I see those same trends in my life. Like, if I don't get enough sleep, I am a very different person on days when I don't get my 8 to 10. I mean, I'm always between 8 to 10. On average, probably about 8.5. If I really need it, I can get that 9. I haven't had a 10er in a while, but I'm not against it. I will. But I completely change just my mood. My mood is completely different, and I can feel the difference with my brain. I'm curious, with schizophrenia, is how important is sleep in the recovery process?
Yeah, it's really important. So, as you said, lack of sleep was a contributing factor to that second episode. And I remember for weeks going through that second episode and leading up to it as well, I was like waking up at like 3 a.m. and not being able to go back to sleep.
Yep.
And just driving around aimlessly for those hours and killing time. And that clearly contributed to me kind of unraveling at that time. And so, and now I can tell exactly, as you were saying, that I'm a different person when I don't get enough sleep. It totally affects my ability to interact with people. I'm much more short-tempered. I am.
Me too.
You too? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm cranky. I'm very cranky.
Yeah. And I get more ego-based, like worried about people, thinking ill of me, and that's not how I want to be. Getting enough sleep enables me to stay level, stay balanced and calm, and enjoy the company of people and love people for the great people that they are, and learn from them about what they're doing, and kind of revel in that togetherness.
Yes. And to everybody listening, I'm going to keep circling back to love. You've got so much love in your heart, and you're cultivating love too. I think that's important to emphasize too. Love is something that's cultivated. It's in a lot, like my wife always says, love is a verb. It's something you do. It's meaning it takes action. Love, it comes
Mm.
out in the form of your actions, your interactions with people. And so I can tell that cultivating love in your heart has been a big part of your recovery journey. I'm curious, what are some early warning signs that someone can look out for, who maybe is listening and they're like,
Hmm.
I'm not sure if maybe I'm experiencing the onset of schizophrenia. What does someone look out for?
Yeah. So some science that One Mind has funded over the years has been able to reveal some early warning signs of oncoming psychosis. And things that you might perceive as an individual beginning to experience these things include kind of two main categories. One of them is what we call unusual thought content. It's just a term for it. What it means is thinking like there's special meaning for you as an individual in things that take place in the world around you. So, for example, maybe you're driving and you see a billboard along the side of the highway advertising a soft drink or whatever, and you think, oh my God, that means that must have a more bubbly personality, or just making this up. But
Yeah.
do you think it's special
Yeah.
message for you, meant for you, right?
Yeah.
So that's one example. Another is kind of paranoia, like thinking for no reason other than it just coming to you that people are out to get you, talking about you behind your back, thinking ill of you.
Mm.
So when I start to experience things like that, I know I've got to get more sleep, take care of my health better. Um, and in the early days, before I had my first psychotic episode, I started to hear a few telltale voices before it actually happened. So, saying disconcerting things to me. In my case, they said, "Baby Brandon, you're a mixed up kid," and that just surprised. Where is this voice coming from, and what does it mean about me? And so, all these things roll together into that experience. So, but things that other people might perceive in you would be withdrawing from your normal activities, like
Okay.
school, like friendships. They might perceive you, if you're in school, might perceive you're doing worse in school.
Mm.
You might notice this yourself. Uh, yeah, those are some good, not good, but concrete signs that somebody might be at risk of psychosis. Add it all
Okay.
together.
That's really helpful. And I had written down on my note card earlier paranoia and how you cope with that, because paranoia, I mean, I've experienced paranoia, and just feeling like, for me, I remember feeling just almost like somebody was like following me in a car behind me, like somebody was chasing after me. Um, but when you have that feeling of paranoia, it's there, and it can become all consuming. So how do you, when you feel that paranoia coming in, how do you respond to it? What is your process of kind of living with that sensation or that emotion or that feeling, while still kind of tapping into that value-based living we've talked about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So fortunately, it doesn't happen that often for me. It only mainly happens when I put myself under a lot of stress and don't take care of my health well enough.
Okay.
But when it does happen, like one of the previous times it happened about a year ago, I had this paranoid thought. I thought, I don't recall the exact thought, but like someone is double crossing me.
Mm.
And I thought, well, geez, what am I going to do about this? I got to do something about this. And so I began to think about that a lot. And then an hour later, I had a similar thought about somebody else totally unrelated doing something behind my back. And then a third thought later in the evening, I thought, oh my God, is everyone against me? Wait a minute, wait. No, this doesn't make sense. I wouldn't have thought this a month ago. It doesn't sound like me to think like this. So something is up.
Right.
And then I recall that was one of the early warning signs of oncoming psychosis. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna take better care of my mental health now. And so I did get enough sleep. I did throttle back on the work, and that helped a lot.
And I think that antidote right there is helpful for people listening too, because that's just a really simple real world example of like, okay, and that's the one thing too, and people with OCD run into this too, where it's like, is this an OCD thought, or is this a normal, quote unquote, normal me thought, if that makes any sense, where you're almost differentiating between like, okay, is this just a Brandon everyday thought, or is this a schizophrenia thought that's coming in, and how do I start to decouple? And I do think that comes with a little bit of experience, because I work with people with OCD all the time, and that's one of the questions I get the most. They're like, how do I know if this is an OCD thought or just a me thought?
What do you tell them?
So with OCD, and this, it sounds like this could actually be helpful, my very 30,000 foot view. So let me also start by saying it might end up putting my foot in my mouth here, so I don't want to come across as ignorant on the topic. But with OCD, these intrusive thoughts create a lot of doubt. They create a lot of anxiety, and they create a lot of doubt. Like you can, with OCD, like you can doubt reality. Like, is this world that I'm living in real or not? Those are the types of thoughts that you can have. And so what they teach you with, and people want the answer. Like, it's anxious thinking, so you want certainty. You want the answer. You want to know, am I in reality? Am I not? And there's all sorts of thoughts that you can experience with OCD. And what they teach you is it's called exposure and response prevention, but a big part of it is acceptance, where you essentially kind of say to yourself, maybe I am in reality, maybe I'm not. Maybe this is true, maybe this isn't. And what it does is it teaches you to live in that area of gray without needing to get a certain answer. And so people develop this skill set. Like when people come to me and they're like, am I having an OCD thought or a me thought? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. And what ends up actually happening over time is, as you build this tolerance to uncertainty and to living in this area of gray, it's kind of backwards in how you would think you would get there, but reality starts to become more clear for you.
That makes sense. Yeah. I'm kind of developing that skill as well, when I recognize that my mood or my feelings are transient. Something is a quote that you like, this too shall pass. I read this in your book, that it doesn't necessarily matter how I'm feeling at any given moment, because it's going to be different later. And if I just let it be what it is, instead of trying to perpetuate it or resist it, then I really get the most out of the experience. I think any experience can be beneficial, whether it's pleasant or not, if you just take it for what it is and experience it in the moment as it happens.
Brandon, that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. And those are the types of concepts that I believe need to be taught in school, because OCD has taught me a lot. And mindfulness, you're talking about a mindfulness tactic right there. And that mindfulness is big in the OCD community. I'm not sure if it's big in the schizophrenia community as well, but like being able to sit with any emotion, understanding that it's transient, that it's going to come and go, it's going to pass, I think is so important. And we're always like, it's so funny. I've got such a deep relationship with my brain now. Like, I had no idea how many different emotions and thoughts I had in a day before OCD, Zach. Like, I was just kind of blindly going through life, like brain on autopilot. And now I'm so deeply in tune, like with everything I do, everything I consume, I can feel how it impacts my brain health. And you're so right. Like, every experience it's transient. It's transient. So this mindfulness component that I learned through OCD is like, lean into it. Get immersed in the experience. Get immersed in the uncertainty and the gray area that, as human beings, we oftentimes don't want to live in. We want to live in that kind of things are clear-cut way, and the reality is that life really isn't clear-cut at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great perspective that you bring, and so helpful. There's a singer-songwriter named Peter Meyer, who I'm a fan of. He lives in Minnesota. I featured him on my webcast a few times, twice actually.
I like him. I've listened to him.
Okay,
I've listened
great.
to him play. Yeah, he's
great. Yeah, isn't he? But he has a song called "God Is a River," and it's about the idea that although we so often want to cling to something solid in our beliefs and our thoughts, certainty, we want to cling to certainty.
Yes.
You might say that God or life or the world is more like a river than a rock. Like life, if you embrace it as a river, then traveling through whatever might happen as it changes, from to use his words, a deep and narrow passage or a peaceful sandy shoal. So many
Mm,
different dimensions of life. If you just embrace it for what it is, then you are at one with what he says is God. And can I think it means you can learn a lot more and experience the worth in all those experiences.
yeah, I think that that's beautiful, and I agree. I agree with that. I'm curious. We've talked a lot about some of the mindsets. What are the best treatment methods for schizophrenia? And you've talked about a lot of science-based medical care. What does that look like?
Sure. So the gold standard of care for psychosis is best applied when it starts early as possible in somebody's onset of psychosis, or even before. So it's called coordinated specialty care, and it involves kind of the five and sometimes more best practice components put together in a coordinated way, and all of it is based on the clients or the person who's involved values and goals, what they want to accomplish in their life.
Mm,
So, for example, if somebody's experiencing psychosis, and like me, for example, they want to go back to school, they want to spend more time with their friends and enjoy it again. Um, then the care team will partner with them to achieve those goals through the treatments that they offer. And the treatments involve, yes, they include medication, like I've used, but they also include individual psychotherapy,
mm,
using cognitive behavioral therapy for psychosis to help people kind of process those weird thoughts and sensations they have. Multifamily group therapy,
mm.
so that the whole family can get involved in supporting each young person as they navigate this treacherous landscape of recovery in so many ways, and involves um, supported education and employment. So as somebody getting back on
Mm.
their feet, helping them succeed as they do that, and case management, which just means tying it all together in a coordinated way with somebody responsible for that. It often involves peer support, so people who've been through it themselves,
Yes.
kind of like what we offer, the inspiration that you want to offer from our lived experience, but in this case, a paraprofessional trained to do this
Yep.
with lived experience. So all this tied together has been shown scientifically to dramatically enhance someone's recovery prospects when it is delivered early. It reduces symptoms about twice as fast as standard care, and improves quality of life about 3 times as fast, if I'm getting the numbers right. But it is notably more effective at helping people get back on their feet than simply medication on its own.
Yes, and that's definitely the same in the OCD community. And unfortunately, I do see, and I don't want to say the word unfortunately, but I do see a lot of people just leaning on the medication when I know from personal experience that medication is a part of the equation, but there is this whole other side of things too, especially with like the talk therapy that can be so important, and then building out that community, the support that you've talked about, and then tying in the value-based living, which we had talked about this prior to, that pursuing of your dreams, right, for the life that you want in terms of a key to well-being. I'm curious, in terms of medication, is there a golden standard there? Is there one medication above the rest that is better? I'm just, as an advocate, I'm genuinely curious just to understand that.
Yeah, that's a really important question. As of now, there's one medication that's been shown to be generally more effective at reducing suicidal ideation, at least as far as I know. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a national expert on this or anything, but um, that's clozapine, something that I've used, and I've
Okay.
heard this from scientists and doctors that it's known to reduce suicidal thoughts
Okay.
better than other antipsychotic medications. The challenge with clozapine is that it can reduce your white blood cell count. In some people, at sometimes, it's not all. It doesn't always happen. I took clozapine for a few years, and I had to be tested every week, excuse me, for white blood cell count. It worked well for me. So it's known as an effective medication, but everybody is different, right? Everybody has a different biochemistry, a different
Yes.
body, a different brain. So different medications work better for different people. And there's a half dozen or more different antipsychotic medications in general use today. Some are what are called atypical antipsychotics, which are meaning that they're more recently more recently invented than the original ones like haloperidol or um, chlorpromazine, which were kind of the first ones discovered kind of by accident. They were meant initially as anesthetics, but the
Okay.
more recent ones not only reduce psychosis, but in some people they also can improve your ability to feel. When as I said, everyone is different. When I started to take aripiprazole, which is the brand name is Abilify, I first started to take aripiprazole. It made me very restless.
Okay.
And I made some reckless decisions, but it also improved my energy and motivation. So
Mm,
for me, it had that effect,
yeah.
and compounded with doing things in the community, being engaged in life again. Those things really helped me to recover from that second episode. Yeah.
Something else I'm curious about too is substances, right? Like I get this question a lot, and for me, I'm an occasional drinker. I don't drink very often because of how it makes me feel and how it reacts with my brain. Is alcohol a part of your life in any way? How does it react with the medications? Like, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, all the medications that I take say don't drink alcohol with these. But for a while, I did try alcohol just to see how it would affect me. I used to enjoy wine and beer, and I work in part for my family's winery business here in Rutherford in the Napa Valley. So, part of my work at the time was to host tastings and tours at the winery. And so I liked tasting some wine to get a sense of the experience people were having. And I enjoyed that. But I noticed when I was doing that, that I would get really tired really fast if I
Mm,
drank more than a couple of sips.
mm.
So I would be kind of functionless socially after just not too much alcohol. Like I couldn't process what was being said, couldn't focus. So lately I've been teetotaling. I mean, I've been doing this for years now, but ever since about 2009 or so, I just haven't drunk alcohol. And
Yeah.
I don't really miss it, except when I'm like at a party and everybody's having fun drinking, and I'm not really in the vibe as much as they are. But other than that, I don't miss it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's in the moment being in that vibe can be fun, but the and my wife and I talk about this, the hangover anxiety
Yeah.
is it makes it almost not worth it.
Do
Like
do you use alcohol? Do you drink?
so I still do occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
But more and more it's becoming infrequent because there's a price to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that uptick and anxiety, that change in my mood, um, if I have one too many drinks, like I feel depressed for a few days. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to bring that up, and I appreciate you being so honest and transparent. And same for me on my end, because I'm very much so still in my journey of figuring out what does that values-based living look like. And I certainly feel that we're both walking in that path. But I think it's important because alcohol is very normalized in our society. And I think that some brains are built better for it than others. And, I'll be the first one to tell my audience that I don't think that there's certainly no way that I could be like a glass of wine a night person. That would be probably one of the very worst things that I could do for my brain. You know what I mean? Like that would just put me in a really dark place. And so
Mm-hmm.
for people in their recovery, kind of thinking about the role that substances are going to play in their life, I just think is really important.
It's great you're mindful of the effect that different things have on you, including alcohol. It's important to notice, how we feel after doing something. Otherwise, if you just kind of engage in whatever you feel like in the moment, then it might hurt you in the long run. Yeah, so I'm glad to hear you're mindful that way.
Yeah, yeah, and same to you. So we're coming here to kind of towards the end of the episode, and you've just been a wealth of knowledge. What is one piece of advice that you would give someone who is right at the start of their mental health journey?
Yeah. So I wrote an original song about recovery from schizophrenia called Horizons Left to Chase. And I performed it in different public venues in 2017, including our One Mind Music Festival for Brain Health and some others as well. That was a highlight of my advocacy career. But what I said in the song is that even with a serious mental health diagnosis, there's still an amazing amount of potential in your life. It doesn't have to hold you back to the degree that you're disabled. So this is a lesson that's taken me a long time to learn through people advising me and through my own experiences. But hold on to your dreams. And your dreams may be different over time. Like you talk about the old Zach and the OCD Zach, and you're doing
Right.
amazing things now, right? And maybe it wasn't exactly what you were doing before. Maybe your goals are different, but you're doing so much good for so many people. And I think that's what really matters in life. Is thriving is doing things that you care about doing, and being in the flow as you do those things,
Mm.
and knowing that what you're doing is meaningful, not just for you, but for the community, for your family and friends, people you care about. Um, so keep pursuing your goals and bringing meaning into your life that way.
Mm.
Because well, I want to say add one thing, because living well fosters more living well. And if recovery really is being able to do what you care about, if you're already starting to do that, then you're already in recovery.
Wow. That's going to be like clipped and put at the beginning as the teaser so that people
Okay.
people listen to the whole episode. That is very powerful. Um, what was it? You said living well leads to more living well.
Yeah.
So powerful, and I agree. I think if you're already doing what lights you up or what makes you happy, then you are in that process of recovery. And looking at recovery as something that's kind of a lifelong journey and something that you can work on every single day is so important. So, Brandon, I want to thank you so much for coming on to the You're Not Alone podcast. Can you let audience members know where they can find you and access more of your resources?
Yeah, thanks. It's been so fun talking with you today, Zach, and learning from you as well. You can learn more about me on my LinkedIn channel, linkedin.com/Brandon Staglin, all one word. Or you can learn more about our organization, One Mind, at onemind.org, onemind.org. So that's most of it. Hope you find
Awesome.
some value there.
Yeah, well, there's a ton of value, I can tell you. Just having been on that website many, many times, there are plenty of resources and other interviews and just a lot of different resources that people can plug into. So, yeah, definitely check that out. And Brandon, I just appreciate having you on so much, and I can't wait for us to have many, many more conversations in the future.
Looking forward to it. Really admire your work and feel honored to be with you today. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.